Good morning, everybody. I would first like to thank a lot NASBA for inviting me to be here with you and taking the floor, trying to give some hints about the experience we have in Europe. And it will be my task today to keep you alive in this morning after the celebration you had yesterday. I hope you had a good evening and you could also sleep well. I am quite relaxed. I had a nice night, so I'm really ready to start. My name is Federico Diomeda. As I've been introduced, I am a practitioner. I have my own firm, which is myself, in my town. I'm here in my capacity of a small practitioner, because this is what I want to touch on today for my 40-45 minutes. And for this reason, I'm here to try help the further discussion on what I'm going to say. I'm not here to teach anything. I'm not a professor, and therefore I think we will have interaction if needed. I would like to spend a couple of words, if this is working, okay, on what is EFA, just to help you understand who we are. EFA is a federation of accountancy bodies in Europe, whose perspective is very much focusing on SMPs for SMEs. There is quite an overlap in terms of representation with FE. FE is much bigger than us. They represent the whole entire profession in Europe, and I'm happy to see Philip Johnson here looking at me. I really appreciate he's with me this morning. And EFA was born some 10 years ago to give the possibility to some accountancy bodies that had not European representation in those times for different reasons, to raise a voice especially focusing on small and medium practitioners. We have 14 members across Europe. We represent quite a huge number of SMPs, and our focus is, as I was saying, trying to defend the interests of those practitioners that have SMEs as the main clients. What I would like to highlight is the last line in the slide. We think we need to promote the SMP for SME profile as a tool for business development. This is very much linked to what I'm going to say further with regard to who are SMPs. And we think we can express and we can represent this word because we are all SMPs. All the EFA is made of SMPs, including staff people. I'm the CEO, but I'm also a practitioner in my country. The president is a practitioner in the UK. Our technical manager is a practitioner in the UK. So we want to be there exactly how we are. I'm going to talk about three main points and trying then to concentrate on cross-border. When I was asked to touch about cross-border activities, I was really aiming to understand exactly what it is for. And then I concluded that cross-border may mean focusing on the subject and on the object of what is cross-bordering. So cross-bordering means a practitioner trying to move from one country to another country to exert his activities, or also to examine the tools that you have and the regulation you have in another country when you go cross-border, when you cross-border. So the landscape is defining who are the subject of cross-bordering, so the SMPs moving from one country to another, and how you move and what you find if you move. So we will have to touch a little bit also on regulation, because the regulation is what is leading the way for practitioners. I know I'm talking to regulators somehow, because NASBA is a regulatory body, and I think we will have the possibility to comment a little bit on the effectiveness of regulation later on. And I would like to make a comment, perhaps you may help me then to understand if I'm right or wrong, on the balance between regulation and consciousness, I would say, the need to regulate and the need to have people understanding what they are doing, which is the classic conflict between rule-based approach and principle-based approach. And when this balance is not precisely defined, practitioners may find or may face difficulties in applying what they have to do. So in my mind, in my view, there are so-called inherent limitations of regulation. And I think it is responsibility of the profession to help regulators to understand if some of these inherent limitations may be wiped out, and in order to help those who have to apply the rules to do it in the best way. I would like to say a couple of words on who are SMPs. This seems quite an exercise, philosophical exercise, and I'm not a fan of definitions, to be honest. But sometimes you need to try to shape what you are focusing on. So, small and medium-sized practices. I think that the need of defining SMPs came from the fact that also within IFAC, the dimension of the interests having IFAC involved with was, from the big four to medium-sized auditing firms and then all the others. And therefore, there was probably the need to understand if an SMP can be distinct from another accounting or auditing firm. So there has been some research, especially in the UK, and what I'm reporting here is a list of qualitative characteristics of SMPs as picked by Professor Robin Jarvis of the Brunel University in the UK, who wrote a paper probably trying to have current discussion on who are the SMPs. Well, if I had to have a definition of SMPs, I am an SMP, and therefore it's finished for me. But I know it's too short definition. So what has been proposed for understanding is a list of characteristics that SMPs can show while performing their activities. But in particular, I would like to read 3 lines that come from a study from Professor Ramirez that in 2009 was asked to try to put out a definition of SMPs, and based on the examining the governance of the accountancy profession, he identified characteristics based on the nature of the word small. And so he said the small is encapsulating physical, big versus small firms, geographical, global versus local practitioners, and moral, well-known anonymous members dimensions, which is a way to say that those who are smaller have much more difficulties to have visibility than those who are bigger. And when you have difficulties in visibility, all the things affecting your world are much more difficult. You need more help, and you need a different help in having the possibility to raise your voice and to defend your interests. In particular, there are some examples here. For sure, it is true that SMPs have SMEs main clients. This is another question coming from the dimension. I have my clients, all my clients are SMEs by definition. I have a big company as a client. It can happen that a practitioner is asked to perform a specific service to a big firm, but normally when you consider a client as an ongoing relationship, then you have SMEs, because this is more fitting with needs of people, and practitioner can understand exactly the dimension of the SME client. There is also another I think, relevant point. The bigger is the company, the more is structured the company itself to solve internal problems. So their need of buying or outsourcing services or advisory service is much less. So what I would highlight, I think, is that SMPs are those practitioners that have to satisfy a variety of needs of a company, because the company has to concentrate purely on the business. All administrative tasks of the company are outsourced because the company is not intending to invest in internal research to cover this kind of needs. There is also very often the perception that administrative tasks based very often on compliance are absolutely useless. The classic owner manager of SMEs is concentrating on his business and is not really happy to have his focus diverted to the administrative part of the organization of his company. So he is therefore very often keen to outsource to somebody else, or that is regarding the organization of his company. So there is a specific need for SMPs to have SMEs concentrating on the business rather than on the structure, which is a tricky situation because quite often bigger SMEs should concentrate on the structure, and they cannot simply forget that a good administration is the good base for the good business. The SMPs operate locally. The professional staff is quite reduced. If I do not have exact numbers with regard to the SMP profession in Italy, but I'm quite sure that the average of professionals working in an accounting firm in Italy is probably no more than 2, which means that quite often practitioners are individual practitioners rather than firms. Then there are also difficulties in how you can set up a firm made of professionals. This depends on how the legislation in the single country is allowing practitioners to gather together to set up a firm. For instance, in Italy, it is not yet allowed to have a limited liability company as the basic structure for an accounting firm. If you want to practice the liberal profession, you have to be on your own, and therefore it is only allowed a kind of partnership. In some other countries, you can set up a limited liability company. There is a discussion on how much is the intervention of non-practitioners in the capital of an accounting firm, and the debate is concentrating on leaving the professionals to be free from influence of those who invest in your job, and so this is. Quite a way to measure how practitioners that have been accustomed to stay alone and to practice their activity on their own are less keen to understand that a more structured accounting firm may help himself to grow. At the same time, the societies want to make free the liberal profession from influence or bad influences coming from pure investors. They look for money rather than good services. So it's an ongoing debate in Europe and in Italy in particular. And therefore, for SMPs, it is vital to receive help from national organizations, because on your own you do not have the time. To follow what is the developments in regulation, legislation, and whatsoever. If I may say, SMPs have how can I say, They have some like handcrafts of themselves. They have a high degree of freedom, but this freedom is balanced by or faced by risk of isolation and self-limitation somehow, because you can miss opportunities if you are small. So small is nice, but at the same time is very much dangerous. So it is up to the national accountancy bodies to help SMPs to solve their inherent difficulties. And SMPs normally applies the so-called JFDI rule, which means simply just flipping do it, which means that you have to do something, you do it. So you don't take care in advance of what's coming up on your desk. A new piece of legislation will be like this, okay, I'm not worried what's coming on my desk. I'm worried once it is on my desk, how I can manage it, because I have to do it. So the mentality of an SMP is, okay, you have a duty, you have to do it. And this is good because the profession is accustomed to solve the problems. At the same time, if you do not receive sufficient help to anticipate the problems, then the problem is on your desk. And the JFDI rule it becomes a big burden on SMPs, even because they are in the middle of a chain of interests, the regulators versus the final receiver of the regulation, which very often is the businessman. So when you are in the middle with a new piece of legislation, then you turn to your client with a big book and say, okay, now you have to do that. And the other one asks, why should I do that? And you can answer, yes, you have to do it. But at the same time, when they complain, when businesses complain about an excess of regulation or bad regulation, then you feel a bit responsible because you probably had the time or the possibility to make it better. So this shows that there is a responsibility for accountancy bodies at the national level and for the representation at the European or international level to help SMPs to be the right filter between regulators and the final receiver. SME brand is only familiar in the local area, which is absolutely the consequence of dimension. SMPs are trusted advisors of SMEs and are SME themselves. The question of trust has been very much considered as a key element of SMPs. This does not mean that all the others working in accounting and auditing are not trusted advisors at all. What we mean here with trusted advisor is that SMPs are able to set up a close relationship with the clients, which means that very often you know about the clients from A to Z. And you are very often also involved in personal problems with the client. So the trust is not necessarily linked to the fact that you are a good practitioner, rather because your client is coming to you for a variety of needs which quite often go over the pure business. I remember an example that happened to me when a company run by two businessmen, wife and husband, they started going into trouble because they were simply quarreling. So I was successful because I helped them to solve their personal problems, and the business remained safe, because very often these things turn into a failure. It seems strange, but so we have to exercise a bit of psychology in our business. And maybe this could be a proposal to educators to insert not only accounting and auditing as matters in the university, but sociology and psychology may probably help people to be prepared when they face problems of such a kind. Now, I'm going to quickly touch on accounting and auditing regulation in Europe, not because I want to repeat what has been said yesterday, in particular by Philip, but because I need to take advantage of some of these examples while then talking about cross-bordering. So now, we have been told yesterday that in the EU, the European Commission and the Parliament are setting the rules for accounting and auditing. It is quite important to say that the auditing part of the profession is very much regulated, because there is a directive that is affecting how auditors are formed, the public oversight, the registration, the qualifications, up to the public oversight board system in Europe in order to guarantee that auditing is performed in Europe in a way that is consistent with the objective of the single market. On the contrary, on accounting, nothing is regulated apart from, I would say, part of the framework that you use to prepare financial reporting. So this created in Europe quite a big difference in terms of application of auditing standards. So we are going to have auditing standards on standards. So we are going to have auditing standards pacifically accepted in Europe at all levels, although not yet, but I think we are going to be ready to apply ISAs in Europe, which from a cross-border perspective creates quite a good result, because a practitioner moving from Italy to France may, apart from difficulties for himself or for overcoming the difficulties of setting up another office in another country, once he established there, may probably use exactly the same tools that he has at home. So having the same standards may help cross-border activities. And auditing is much more equal in Europe and probably in the world rather than accounting. When you turn to accounting, the question is completely different, because national general accepted accounting principles are still making the difference in all the countries. You know, and then this has been touched yesterday by Philip, that we are going to have a reform of the accounting directive, the 4th and the 7th directive. They will become one directive, because the 4th directive is on single accounting principles for single financial statement, and the 7th directive is for consolidated financial statements. So they are going to put all the things in one directive to make it easier to read, and there will be a new one. But the question is, what is the result in terms of having a general accepted European accounting principle? So this is very far from what we are going to receive. So this means that in the near future, although after this reform, a practitioner desiring to move to another country to provide services on financial reporting will have to apply the local GAAP in the local country. Is this an issue or not? It may be an issue. It may be an issue. For sure, the difficulties of moving from one country to another country could be less if you, at least when you go in another country, find exactly the same book, the big book, and you apply the JFDI rule with the same book wherever you move. At least is a minor difficulty. I've mentioned. Oh, sorry. Because these slides are shorter than mine. Right. Now, just to give you an understanding on the way the Commission is addressing this, the renewal of the accounting framework in Europe, I think it would be nice to mention a couple of points that I picked from the last compromise of the Council published in June 2012. I've decided to go for the compromise because the directive is slightly different. The compromise is the first attempt. Then there will be probably another compromise under the Cypriot presidency. But it is just to anticipate the possible solution that has been already discussed within the member states at European level. So one of the points you read looking at this compromise is that in the first whereas, you find the word simplify. And I think it's quite important for non-European people to understand that we are under the pressure of simplification. You may say, well, this is good for businesses to simplify. The question is that when you simplify something that has to be deeply managed for the success of financial reporting, pure simplification may be a challenge. We have already experienced the bad effect of pure simplification in Europe. because this was intended by the Commission to reduce administrative burdens. And then reducing administrative burdens, what does it mean? You, for instance, you do not publish your financial statement, because they say financial statement is a burden to be published. Or they say you have a very simplified layout so that you do not need to go to a practitioner and spend money for preparing or buying services to help your financial reporting. So when the thinking of politician is that the accounting profession is a burden, because the immediate consequence of having an administrative burden in accounting is that the accounting profession is a burden, then you start feeling a little bit uneasy, because we don't want to be a burden for anybody. We are problem solvers. We should go and look for the problems and then try to solve them. So simplification is in Europe a tricky word that can be a nice way to sell the products to the final receivers, but at the same time is the mirror of and sort of inherent difficulties of politicians to understand how important is good financial reporting. And I will make some example on that if needed. The true and fair view has remained as a good principle to be achieved. They are going to confirm quantitative definitions of enterprises. So the enterprises will be divided in 3 categories: small, medium, and large, according to a dimension. We don't know if dimension is exactly the right way to do it, but this is how it is now. Then you have another comment on the burdens that I was telling before. Publication of financial statements can be burdensome for micro undertakings. So this was a way that the Commission used to resume micro entities that were wiped out from publication and to have them back into the new piece of legislation, with this caveat: can be burdensome. We don't know how publishing a financial statement can be burdensome, but this is what I think. Then they restated the going concern, the prudence, and the accrual basis are key elements for financial reporting in Europe. Fair value accounting for certain financial instruments. So this is another point that in Europe has been debated a lot, and maybe it's the reason why IFRS for SME was not successful. That there was the feeling of an excess of fair value measurement within Europe. Management report may be excluded from certain size of companies, and so on. At the end, what I want to say is that we will have probably a more harmonized accounting directive, different from the first one, with less option at the member states level, but still we will have a lot of differences. And this is why I will talk about that a little bit later. EFA decided to run a research on the differences between some national GAAP and IFRS for SMEs to identify if it is true that we can say that we cannot apply IFRS for SMEs, or because the difficulties are so many, or because in fact the difficulties are not so many, but there is no intention to do it for political reasons. So the cross-border means that if you want to go and move in another country, you will find probably different rules in terms of accounting. Auditing is less difficulty, as I was saying, but moving to another country means that you will have to apply local gaps and then to study again from scratch everything. I've mentioned EFRAG here just for you to know. EFRAG is another acronym. It stands for European Financial Reporting Advisory Group. This was set up when Europe was moving to IFRSs. There was the need to have an advisory group that was supposed to help the Commission to understand how to endorse ISs and IFRSs in Europe, and then EFRAG was set up exactly for these reasons. And now EFRAG is going through a process of renewal of its governance, because the national standard setter of main countries in Europe are desiring to keep sort of control on the direction on financial reporting in Europe, which means that we are not going to having at least, I don't say a European standard setter, but what could be close to be a European standard setter, to have a voice of Europe towards ISB, which is now the point of reference for financial reporting in Europe. So again, we will have national standard setter having an influence in the evolution of financial reporting, which seems to me to say that at the end, cross-border on accounting will remain a difficult task for those who want to cross-border, whatever is the result. On auditing, as I said, things are a little bit easier. The regulation of the auditing profession is equal all over Europe because of the directive. So challenges are only linked to the real possibility for a practitioner to find clients in another country, considering then that auditing in Europe is, although applied also to non-listed companies, is going to be probably less used as a consequence of the fact that here again, auditing is partially seen as an administrative burden for some kind of companies. Philippe yesterday mentioned the debate in the European Parliament with regard to an amendment proposed by EP Karim regarding the exemption of small-sized companies from compulsory audit. So just to let you understand that the politicians are ready to play on safe financial reporting and safeguards on financial reporting to reach their own objective. I'm not particularly worried if tomorrow somebody will decide to eliminate the audit, because it's a lost battle for a single person. But this means that the profession in Europe has to make clear to the businesses that you cannot survive without any kind of assurance engagement. So the battle may be tomorrow in Europe to raise the profile of alternative assurance engagements as a possible tool for practitioners to go on with this kind of activity. And this will raise the problem of how to use alternative assurance engagement in different countries if the only harmonized system will be auditing. So there will be the need to see if the profession can push the national standard setters or regulators to endorse alternative assurance engagement equal all over Europe, has the safeguard when tomorrow the audit will be applied less and less. So I think we need to do something on that also. So cross-border in terms of auditing is much easier than cross-border on accounting, because the ISAs are supposed to become applied in Europe without any restriction. Possibly, there are difficulties with small and undertakings. I would like to mention just that in the current discussion on the reform of the auditing directive, there are parts of this new piece of legislation where the Commission introduced the concept of alternative assurance engagement, or better, of reviews as a form of simplification. And I know that in the Parliament some amendments are going to reshape the review as alternative to audit in a more general concept of assurance engagement, which means that it will be possible tomorrow in Europe that there will be a shift from audit to alternative assurance engagements as a piece of legislation in Europe. I'm not talking about the auditor reporting, because this is an ongoing discussion. The fact that the auditor reporting will be changed should not be an issue for cross-border activities or practitioners, because if it will be changed within Europe as a whole. So whatever you find, you will apply the JFDI rule according to what will be proposed. Now, a final comment on regulation. We have seen that all this attempt of regulating all possible aspects on accounting and auditing are creating difficulties. So the question is, what's the aim of regulation? The regulation should be to make easier life of people, basically, I would say. So make life easier. What does it mean? You are happy when you apply a rule. You pay less when you apply a rule. You feel that after you apply the rule, the consequences are positive for you. All this kind of all these elements should drive good regulation. But the question is how to measure the effectiveness of regulation. We have in Europe the so-called impact assessment procedure, that is a sort of measurement of how the regulation may impact tomorrow. But I guess that it is then very often difficult to understand if regulation has been effective after you applied. At the same time, to measure the effectiveness of regulation can create an excess of a sort of over-regulation, because after 1 year or 2 years you revise everything, you find the way to change and you want to change again. So it's a sort of never-ending stories. So I think that practitioners that have difficulties in following all the process have to go on with a sort of different mentality, which is the mentality of facing the problem from time to time and then to find out exactly what they have to do at that particular moment, which is the instinct of solving the problems. At the same time, it is true that businesses are going on with their own language, and therefore speaking the language of businesses probably is better than speaking the language of regulation. I would say that regulators should promote consciousness in societies for those who are going to apply their regulation. And I know that, again, the balance between rule-based and principle-based approach is very much difficult. But it's difficult because it would be nice to have people not having to apply a rule, because on their own they understand what they have to do, but you need rule. At the same time, the rule should not kill the ability of the person to apply the rule. So this is why on accounting and auditing we are having an approach with the Commission that is what is relevant. We want to have that. We want to have in the legislation what is relevant, not what is, according to politicians at that moment, useful to win the election next year. So the question of relevance is creating. Let me give you an example. When ISB created IFRS for SME, made a number of simplification from the big book, and one of these simplifications was to eliminate the impairment test for the goodwill. Now, because they said SMEs do not need to have such a burdensome activity measuring the goodwill, so you will simply amortize it in 10 years unless you are able to define a different time. Now, if I judge it from the usefulness of impairment tests for SMEs, considering that having an impairment test means that you are obliged to measure the ability of your company to produce revenues in the near future, for SMEs this is vital. So this is what I think is a sort of conflict of reasonable approach of relevance. We made the proposal. We mentioned with the Commission that for us, having the impairment test as a tool for SMEs was not burdensome, say it better, it is a burden, but it is a useful burden. So I think we have a responsibility to transfer to SMEs what is better for them, not simply to say you have to spend less so you are on a safer position. So this kind of conflict when regulators try to be pushed by a short-term, I would say, vision, and it's a challenge for the profession, because on the contrary, it seems that we are proposing burdensome activities to make money on them, while on the contrary, we are sure that this tool will be effective and useful for the client. So it's quite difficult for us, because we are always seen as promoting vested interest in this piece of legislation. Now, from natural gas to ISAs, I already mentioned this. Now let me move to quickly. I don't know how long I have. How much time I have? Okay, thank you. I wanted to mention a couple of points on cross-bordering. Reasons why you might find it difficult to move from one country to another country. Tax services. Taxation is the most complicated world in Europe, probably in the world. But if we consider Europe, it is a real mess. So if you want to go out and to provide tax services, even if it is simply compliance, you have to be ready to start a battle. And I think this is refraining professionals from even daring to move unless they have to move for personal reasons from a country to another country. It is very much difficult to overcome differences in taxation in Europe. VAT is more harmonized. VAT is harmonized with regard to the movement of services and goods in the single market in the EU. So it's a partial harmonization, because the directive is not affecting VAT applied at the national level. So we have a sort of little monster, which is all 27 different VAT regimes that are supposed to be one when they move to the European single market. But at least it's an attempt to have a direction towards a single VAT application. And this is another difficulty, because linked to taxation, direct or indirect taxation, there is the word of sanctions. And how can you dare not to provide good services when your client is risking sanctions that can kill your business? So the effect of the responsibility of making mistakes in such kind of services, in my view, is a sort of warning, a big warning for professionals to move abroad on their own. Now, another quite nice point is intra-EU mobility of professionals. This is quite important, because despite the difficulties that the single market has, the attempt we have brought forward by the Commission and the Parliament is to really create the single market. So now, if you want, we are in the US, you have 50 and 55, sorry for not getting the right number, states in the US. You are a federation of states, you speak the same language, you probably have the same culture, although I understand that the culture is different everywhere, but from a European perspective, the US is the US. On the contrary, Europe is not Europe. Europe is made of 27 different countries with their own legal and cultural strong differences. The attempt of having people moving within the single market, within different countries easily, and to establish here and there, to exert their professions or the job they want, I think it's a nice objective, but it is really, really challenging. We have currently a directive that was issued in 2005, and it's now under revision on the so-called Professional Qualification Directive. It's a directive that is aiming to create a common basis for mutual recognitions of provider of services and of professional services within the EU, in order exactly to allow people to move from here to there. The aim of the Commission is to enhance mobility within the EU, and also, I think it's nice thinking, to have people having the chance to transfer their abilities from one country in another. So at the end, the aim is positive. So having best practices moving from here to there, and therefore creating harmonization within the single market. The big challenges are simply coming from the fact that you cannot write a piece of legislation that is accepted here and there without any kind of consequences. I'll try to make an example. Because looking at the professional accounting services, the rule is that if in a country you receive the qualification of accountant in that country, because this is recognized there, once you have this recognition there, you are supposed to be registered in another country register of the same accounting profession, because it is considered equivalent. Now, the question is, how can things be equivalent by law? Because the aim is interesting, but effective, the result is not exactly the same, because the equivalence of the qualifications is on the paper, but in reality it is not the same. So we had cases, just to let you smell the misuse of this piece of legislation, where Italian professionals or Italian students finishing the university, they went to a university in Spain, they got a title there, they graduated there, then they registered in the local register of the accounting profession, and then they say, because I am a professional authorized in Spain, I have the right to become authorized in Italy. So with this way, they could come back becoming authorized or registered professionals in Italy without having had the same requirement, having passed the same requirements in Italy. The difference seems minimal, but in Spain you do not have to have a state exam. In Italy you have to have a state exam. So it is easy, it is positive to have people moving from here to there, but you have to respect some equivalence. You cannot, otherwise we are all free to do what we want within the European Union. So this is under revision now. The so-called compensation measurement are under observation now. The member states are requiring the Commission to consider what should be done to guarantee that the movement is free, but at the same time is guaranteeing the same level of quality than you have in the origin member state. So it's a big challenge, but it is something we are moving on. I'm not sure how many people will decide to move effectively and will cross border physically from one country to another country. I personally believe that it is very much difficult to move from one country to another country and being the same. The language barrier, it seems nothing, but the language barrier is exactly the main point of difficulties when you move from one country to another country. And the language barrier is very much close to the cultural barrier. We have differences in culture within the single country. The north and the south part of Italy are completely different. I know colleagues of mine moving from the south to the north and vice versa, facing a lot of difficulties, although speaking the same language and applying the same big book. So can you imagine the difficulties of entering into another cultural environment, speaking the different language and trying to understand how long it will take to you to establish the relationship with the clients by which you will be recognized as a trusted advisor, because this is at the end what an SMP should do. Probably it would be much better to move to another country for pure compliance. Today with IT systems, I can set up an office in France, I buy the IT system in France, I have an employee in France, and I can provide compliance without probably difficulties. But this is compliance. We are talking about professional services, which is brainstorming on the needs of SMEs to grow and to develop the businesses, which is, I think, quite different from pure compliance. So it's a big challenge. I appreciate the efforts of the Commission trying to have people moving, but there are inherent limitations or inevitable limitations made by the language differences and the culture. I don't know what your the kind of experience you may have within the different states of the United States of America, but I can tell you that Europe is it's a real mess. But we are happy to be in a mess because we decided to have this mess. So we are really happy. But we cannot solve the problems of people that have different kind of lives. You may remember that when the first constitution of Europe was discussed in the Parliament, the point was if Europe was sharing, the countries in Europe were sharing the same Christian origin. So the debate was tremendously high, and luckily they decided to avoid any reference to religion in the constitution. But we even, and by the way, in a country where Protestant and Catholics are surviving, but probably proud of their own differences. So the differences are the salt of good life, I would say, because if we were all equal, probably we were dying after a couple of months of boring life. So we are happy to be different. So the question for me is that rather than trying to solve differences, we should take the differences into the positive consequences they may have. I would like to put together what we have together and then using what we have together to try diminishing the differences that are remaining, which is a completely different approach from eliminating with the regulation the differences. It's impossible for regulators to eliminate the differences. You can forget they exist, but you cannot eliminate the differences. So it's a big challenge. How much I have more? 2 minutes, right, okay. No. Yes, 2 minutes, yeah. I was warming up, so pity I have only 2 minutes, yeah. So I would like to mention quickly this comparison study we ran in 2009. You can download it from our website if you want. We wanted to focus on specific differences that the local gaps of 9 member countries had with IFRS for SMEs. This exercise was helpful for us to measure the so-called incompatibilities of IFRS for SMEs with national general accepted accounting principles, in parallel with the study that was run by EFRAG, European Financial Reporting Advisory Group, on incompatibilities of IFRS for SMEs with the EU directive. Now, because the directive is not covering the framework, the whole framework of financial reporting, the incompatibilities found by EFRAG were less than incompatibilities of a full set of accounting principles applied at the local level. So we decided to run a study with these 9 member countries and to find out what are the differences. Now, the differences, there are more differences. The question is, if you look at the differences, what you learn from them? You have differences that you can solve, or are you going to use the differences to say, I cannot solve them? Because the approach is, if you want, you can do. If you don't want, you will never do. And in Europe, unfortunately, we have this problem of member states that are not willing to delegate the power of setting financial reporting standards to a non-European body, which is ISB. And this will probably, create a situation where we will never have the possibility to have a common financial reporting standards and framework unless we have a European standard setter or we have a directive that is fully comprehensive on that. But as I showed you before, the new directive incoming now after the reform will be covering probably 60% of what you can imagine as a framework for financial reporting. For instance, we do not have the definition of assets and liabilities. You may say, well, you don't need a definition of asset liability because you know what they are. I'm not sure this is exactly easy. I remember there was a study paper written by a professor of the Michigan University. I remember the name was Dichev, D-I-C-H-E-V, Dichev, I don't know about the pronunciation. Anyway, he was proposing a way of interpreting the definition of asset and liability into giving the prevalence to asset and liabilities and giving the prevalence to profit and loss. So because the double entry means that you have the picture of profit and loss and asset and liabilities, what is the prevalence you are giving at the picture? Do you read before profit and loss? Do you read before assets and liabilities. Where do they come from? So in the ISB approach, you start from assets and liabilities and you go down to profit and loss. If you come to my country, I've been taught, and I normally apply a completely different approach. I start from profit and loss, and then assets and liabilities are the result of the activity. So I give prevalence to the business, and then the result of the business are assets and liabilities. You may say, well, it's easy to reverse, but it's a question of mentality. How is this difference in mentality affecting the way you produce financial report and then you use it? So maybe it's only a philosophical question, but it's a kind of difference. We do not have this in Europe. Once we have it in Europe, we will probably have to find out what will be the consequences. So if politicians want to use the differences to say that we don't want to solve the differences because this is too hard, there are tax connections, it is impossible, but in fact they are simply hiding the fact that they do not want to give to ISB the power to become a European standard setter, well, okay, let us know and we will be happy, whatever it is. To conclude, yes, the language of SMEs. I would like to make a final point on the accounting profession. Now, we have auditing and accounting, which for me are specialization of the same profession. I don't like to see or to say that we have the accounting profession, the auditing profession. We are liberal professionals that are applying accounting and auditing as a private choice of services provided to SMEs, plus all the other kind of services you may have to assist the businesses. But it is quite true that if you have an auditing, this means that you had a financial statement. And if you had a financial statement, you had a business. So if you put it in the right chronology, you have the business, the financial statement, and the auditing. Then the profession is here, assisting the business in developing and growing, setting up and going concern. Then you produce a financial report at the end of the year because this is your obligation. And then if required by legislation, you have also an audit. So we are covering the three parts. But the last one doesn't exist if you do not have the first one. So if in terms of importance, I would like to see SMPs doing the best they can do to have business growing. Because if this is going on, then you have also the last part, or whatever it will be in the future, assurance engagement. So this is why I don't like to see divisions within the three parts of the activities of SMPs, because SMPs, they have this ability of providing services in all respects. You cannot make a choice of only this and that, otherwise you do not survive. You have to give to your clients whatever you can, provided that you have the competence, of course. You cannot sell services you are not able to provide. So, said that, the language of the business for me is the harmonized language of the world. I personally do not care if a client of mine is going to China because China has a different regulation. I'm sure they will understand as businessmen. I want to make money with you. I have this product. You like it or not? Are there competitors? Are there technological differences? This is the common language of businesses. So we have already an harmonized system. We cannot fix to financial reporting and auditing as the key points, otherwise you cannot make the business. I understand that you can make them better if you have also a common language in reporting. But if it is not going to be the final result in the near future, I cannot wait for regulators to set up a global financial reporting standard while starting my activity. I need to start my activity now. So while regulators and standard setters and politicians will find the time to provide us with a world global accounting and auditing standard setting, fantastic. In the meantime, I have to help my clients do their businesses. They cannot die waiting for regulators. And therefore, I'm happy to say that we experience the fact that the language of the business is equal all over the world. So SMPs, the professionals, have the responsibility to help SMEs to talk and to understand with others the language of the business. This can be done regardless of cultural and language barriers. And this is my positive final conclusion. Thank you very much.
Well, it's encouraging to hear that North America is not the only place that has mobility problems. Any questions for Federico?
You can hear me, of course. Sorry, Rod.
He was the only one.
Okay, I'm sorry. Let me introduce myself properly. I'm Carole Presso, and I'm with the Certified General Accountants Association of Canada. When policymakers talk about mobility, they always talk about the physical move of mobility from an individual from one jurisdiction to another. And I like to remind them, and especially when we talk about accounting services, we also talk about the temporary provision of services. So, or what I like to call following your client as the client moves across jurisdictions for things like regulatory filings and that. So my question is really about how in the EU, and you look at me with a funny look, how in the EU do we accommodate this idea of temporary provision of services across country borders?
Yes.
If at all, I suppose.
No. I'm not totally aware of details, but temporary service is part of this directive of 2005 that is under renewal now. And I think that there is consensus of facilitating temporary services, but at the same time there are some headaches from member states' point of view, because there is no definition of temporary service. So we are now in the process where the Commission is asked to define the temporary service in order to understand exactly what it means. But I can tell you that this will be solved for sure, because this was already in the first directive, so we had mobility for temporary services. What I heard from the Commission is that the percentages of professionals moving also on temporary basis was so insignificant that I'm sure that probably we have to do something more apart from, giving the right definition. So the challenge is, in my view, that again, it will not be the definition or the rules set by the Commission that will help people to move. I know it's a non-answer, but if you compare it with what can happen in the United States, the difficulties you have to overcome are much less than what we have. Even if you can go on temporary basis outside, this will be, something that can happen how many times and to how many people. So if the solution is to have people moving freely from here to there in Europe to set up the firm where they want, this can help, but the main point remains how to help people moving not on temporary basis but on stable basis. Mm-hmm. So maybe if you want, we can keep in touch, and I can help you with the evolution of this directive, and if this can help you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Molto grazie, Federico.